Hello everybody, and today I'm bringing to you a statement that I never thought I'd be able to say 4 years ago when I became fairly disappointed with World of Warships. And that is, I think Warthunder Naval has it beat. I'm going to explain myself here. I've got a decent list of pros and cons, and a minor list of just differences between the two games that I got to get across. First off, if you don't want to hear me ramble about the whole thing, I'll have timestamps down below. But let's get into it. I do need to preface that I've only played arcade mode in Warthunder Naval, and I haven't touched World of Warships in probably 3 years. I haven't seen the sub gameplay. I don't really want to. It's just not for me anymore. I also wouldn't be bringing you this video if Warthunder hadn't taken the course that they took recently when all the players were complaining about their economy and the grind and everything else. It seems like Warthunder's getting better with that stuff. I'd like to see how far they're going to go with the roadmap that they promised. I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but they did say that the grinds are going to get better. They're already fixing the economy. They're already fixing the stock experience. So we'll see where that goes, but I feel I'm in good enough confidence with the game that I can make this video. So, key differences between these two systems. The major one you're going to see right off is the aiming system. Warthunder takes into account your ship speed and the enemy ship speed, whereas World of Warships, at least when I played, I don't think they would have changed the system, only took into account the enemy ship speed when you were playing, so you only had to lead for that ship speed, not your own. So it's a bit of a learning curve with that, but I'll get into that a bit more with the pros and cons. Warthunder is also an interesting mix of ships, boats, which are, if you think German torpedo boats in World War II, that's about what you're going to be playing in that category, and planes, though they don't have carriers. So it definitely mixes it up and changes World of Warships formula. The tech trees for these games are massively different. In World of Warships, you're going from Tier 1 to Tier 10. You may be only cruisers through that if you're grinding a cruiser line. You may split off and go into a battleship branch, and they're all somewhat around the same period to balance themselves. In Warthunder, you go from destroyers to cruisers to battleships, but that's something I'm going to get a bit more into when I get into the pros and cons of Warthunder Naval. The other things I wanted to mention is Warthunder Naval is a mix of different game modes. There's the 3-cap game mode that everybody's used to. There's a fleet defense game mode where you're basically trying to kill the enemy team's AI fleet while they try to kill yours. You can sink them at the same time. And then there's a single cap, basically map control game mode where both sides need to keep ships in the cap unless the other team takes it and wins the game. So it's definitely diverse, but the gameplay I've found is also slower. You're at a little bit more range. You're not going to find torpedo runs for the most part, and when you do, they're actually pretty exciting. But all in all, I've found the pace of the gameplay to be a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical, and it ends up you'll have the shortest game is probably 10 minutes if nobody's pushing caps, if the team's just collapsing around you. And the longest games I've had is upwards of 30, where it's just a constant slugfest of people respawning ships and everything under the sun. So it's very different. So getting into the pros, the first thing I want to get out of the way is that Warthunder has respawns. You're not going to be out of the battle just because your ship sank. You can spawn in a different one in your 5-ship lineup, and you can spawn every one of those 5 ships if you wanted to, if not more if you have backups for specific ones. Arcade mode will also give you planes to spawn, so you can fly across the map and bomb a ship, or shoot down the enemy planes if you felt like doing that instead. The second thing I'd like to get into for the pros is the damage models of the ships. I think are a lot better in Warthunder. You're not going to have that percentage chance of possibly damaging a model or lighting a ship on fire or anything like that. Your shell's going to penetrate or it's not going to penetrate. HE will not penetrate an armor belt, and it's not just going to deal damage outright because it's a flat damage amount or anything. If you aim for guns, if you aim for modules, if you know you can penetrate into that ship's boiler rooms, you're actually going to damage those modules directly instead of just having a chance, and it's going to deficit the enemy ship a lot more if you aim properly for the damage model instead of the World of Warship method of just dump HE at everything and do a lot of damage over time and be annoying. The other thing I want to get into going off of that is there's no bow-in gameplay in War Thunder, or at least a very small amount of it. In World of Warships, you can saturate parts of your ship so they won't take any more damage. You don't have to worry about your guns being taken out as much. In War Thunder, you're probably going to lose all your front firepower capabilities, and the chances are they're going to aim over the top of your ship. They're going to be driving shells into your superstructure, taking out your bridge, probably penetrating down into your engine bay. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with that, and you're also not putting all your guns on target. And I found that in War Thunder, a lot of times it's better to just get the damage out rather than trying to be fancy and bow in and, bounce stuff that way versus, using your armor belt. So you definitely don't see a ton of that. The other thing is your torpedo protection actually works. World of Warships just had a damage modifier attached to it where it'd take off 50% of the torpedo damage. In War Thunder, if you take a torpedo to your torpedo belt, you're either not going to get a lot of damage, or if it's a low grade torpedo, you might not take any damage at all. It might just hit you and your ship shrugs it off. Maybe some minor repairs, but on the flip side, if you take that torpedo where there isn't a torpedo belt, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to take massive amounts of flooding, you're going to have to repair, there's probably going to be fires, you're probably going to have broken turrets if it hit near any one of those, and there's a good chance it could detonate your ship. So I do like that you can position your ship if you know you have to take a certain torpedo because you can't get away, to minimize the damage. Another thing I want to say along the lines of torpedoes, and this goes for shells, this goes for planes, this goes for ships, 90% of the time you can see it coming. You're not going to have to wait for this invisible torpedo to show up within your detection range and just have no hope of avoiding it. If you're actually looking at the surface of the water from your gun view, you can see the trails left behind by the torpedoes, and you can take action early to avoid them. You can also see the torpedoes falling off the enemy ship when they launch them, so that you know, okay, I need to make a turn, make a stop, something along those lines to avoid those. Same goes for the color of the shells. If you're used to World of Warships method of HE and AP being different colors, and maybe SAP is a slightly different one, War Thunder is going to be fairly similar. You're going to be able to tell what they are while they're in flight, and you can take measures to avoid them. Say if you don't want to take HE damage anymore because you're sick of putting out fires, or maybe that armor piercing shell that's coming towards you is going to add to your flooding a little bit too much if it goes through your hull. So you want to balance that out and avoid that one, and maybe take something else if a bunch of ships are shooting at you. So it's actually pretty nice that they kept that fairly standard and easy to see. Another thing I really like about War Thunder is it uses crew instead of health points, HP, whatever you want to call it for World of Warships. So instead of an arbitrary number attached to each ship that they could nerf or add to, it's however many crew that ship could take. That amount of crew, if you lose a bunch, if you still have your full crew, affects how fast and how slow some stuff gets done on your ship. And eventually, when you start running way down on crew, your ship's going to start failing. You're going to sink, it's not going to be able to repair itself, the guns aren't going to work, ammo's not going to reload, that kind of thing. But on the flip side of that, you also have unlimited consumables. Your fire prevention, your repair ability, your dewatering, all these are unlimited. There's no cooldown to them. There is some gameplay attached to it, and I'll get into that in the cons because it's more of a learning curve. but it's nice that you can have those all game. You don't have to worry about not pushing because you don't have your FPE or you can't repair your ship or something like that. And also going along with that, there's no gimmicks. There's no reload boosters. There's no speed buffs. There's no ships that have 1800 repairs or a bigger repair or a faster repair and stuff like that. So I think it kind of helps level the playing field, and the lack of gimmicks is really nice in my opinion. Also, there's no carriers or subs. You don't have to worry about homing torpedoes. You don't have to worry about squad of planes that your ship can't touch because it wasn't given any AA, or you haven't upgraded it to have AA, or you haven't put the modification on to shoot down planes enough, or something of that sort. So there is still planes, but you're not worried about just a carrier dominating the game because they can spot everything and just absolutely destroy the playing field. Getting into a couple more of the gameplay oriented things, what I've found is the shell flights are a lot more realistic. Instead of the US Navy ships having a space program, their shells arc a little bit more, but it's not just an arbitrary factor that they added into the game because US ships need to have high rate of fire but super high arcs. Most of the ships are fairly similar, but you can definitely tell the difference between each ship's fire arcs if you know what's shooting at you. The other thing I want to say is the aim is a lot more realistic. It's taking into account both the distance between you and the target, which way they're moving, how they're moving towards you, and the speed of both you and the target. If you stop your ship, the aim is going to feel just like World of Warships. But if you're moving, that's going to affect your point of aim horizontally against the enemy ship. So it's a lot more factoring into it, but it makes it a lot easier than just, it's a destroyer, put it here, click the button, move it a little bit, click the button. A little bit nicer overall. The other thing in arcade that helps with the learning curve on this that I found really nice is there's an aim assist. It's not aiming for you, but at least horizontally it's giving you a circle after a period of time of once you're aiming at a ship. It's giving you a circle to give you the approximate place you should put your guns for horizontal, and then you can lead your target vertically, or rather distance between the two of you, however you want. And then that circle will update every 5 seconds, 3 seconds, somewhere in there, and give you a new point if they've moved or if they've lost their engines and their ship's slowing down, if you've made a maneuver. So you're not just out in the cold trying to learn a new aiming system. It's going to help you a little bit. It's not going to do everything, but it's pretty useful. The other thing that helps with your aim is the damage viewer. When you hit an enemy ship, a picture of their ship's going to pop up in the corner with where you hit, what you damaged, what your shells did, where they all landed. You can see the spots that they hit, type deal. And it kind of helps you figure out where you need to aim, where your next shot needs to get corrected to, and it's just another way to help you learn what's going on in the game. The other major thing that I've noticed is there's not a lot of hide behind islands and shoot over it and nobody can shoot back. Since everybody has fairly similar shell velocities and all the ships are fairly large, I guess, if you can shoot over an island, there's a pretty good chance the enemy ship can shoot over it too and hit you back. And there's a good chance that if you're also hiding behind the island, you're not moving, so they have a lot easier time aiming at you. I have seen some ships that are able to do it, but it's very few and far between. Another big thing that I wanted to put in the pros that I should have put higher on the list is player-controlled secondaries. Way back when I was still playing World of Warships, this seemed like a very iffy comment to me. Whether they'd even be useful, whether it was too broken, but after playing Warthunder for a decent amount of time, I can say it's actually pretty cool. They might not be as powerful as your main guns, and they might have a different velocity, but the aiming system still compensates for it. If you click, your main guns are going to go off. If you click again, your secondaries are going to go off. There are AI-controlled secondaries. Usually it's attributed to your anti-aircraft, which will open up if it thinks it can penetrate the ship. So it will control itself on its own. The other thing is you can control your anti-aircraft. So if a plane is really bothering you, you can simply swat it out of the sky by taking control of your anti-aircraft and actually aiming it, versus letting the AI do all the work and hoping that it hits the plane, which it still has a higher chance of hitting planes than whatever World of Warships has, in my opinion. The other thing that ships can do is launch planes off of their deck and pilot them themselves. I should say catapult, but if you're in a safe spot and you want to go launch your seaplane, go right ahead. You can park your ship, or even leave it sailing if you wanted to. Launch your plane and you can actually fly that around. Maybe you want to go take a cap point with your seaplane. Maybe you want to go drop a couple light bombs on an enemy ship. Maybe you need a smoke cloud somewhere. That's all things you can do with these little seaplanes that you're actually allowed to control. And then you can just jump back to your ship at any time. If your plane's still in the air, you can jump right back to that. It's actually pretty simple and pretty well implemented, in my opinion. Getting into the actual grinding of your ship, every ship has modifications that you have to research to upgrade it as you go along. It's kind of like World of Warships in that regard, but a little bit different because you're upgrading systems on your ship. And there's diversity in how you can upgrade them. Some people go for the survivability first. Some people want their turrets to turn faster. Some people want a certain shell faster. So there's a lot of diversity in how you can grind out your ship and pattern it per how you like to play. And the last thing I want to put in the pros category is the voiceovers that they have for the ship. They are very, very handy for keeping you aware in the battle. It's going to tell you that a destroyer just got spotted 10 kilometers off to your side. It's going to tell you where the fire is in your ship so you can prioritize it if you want to. It'll tell you if you're taking too much flooding damage from maybe taking an armor-piercing shot. It'll tell you if torpedoes are spotted, stuff like that. So it's actually pretty handy to have, and I didn't realize how useful the voiceover could be until I played War Thunder. Alright, so let's get into the cons of Warthunder Naval. And the first big one I want to get out of the way, and it's the one everybody brings up immediately, is detonations. Yep, they happen. It's happened to me a ton of times. I've gotten mad over it because maybe I shot 3 salvos and my ship exploded because somebody hit my ammunition center. And it's happened because I didn't put out a fire in my ammunition center fast enough, or I just didn't put it out, is probably the thing that happened. I'm going to White Knight for it a little bit because it's not just an RNG chance like World of Warships. Somebody does have to hit a very critical component of your ship, aka the ammunition, in order to detonate your ship. Sometimes it won't detonate just because they hit your ammunition. Maybe it'll cause a bunch of damage, maybe it'll just go through, maybe it'll just light a fire. It's not a guarantee. They have to actually cook it off. And you can mitigate it. You know, you can turn, you can jockey to avoid their aim. At the end of the day, you can take less shells. The other thing you can do is not take torpedoes if you're not using them a lot, because having them on your ship is just a giant explosive waiting to be hit. But at the end of the day, they're still there. Maybe, you know, you'll get 3 shots into a game and your ship just explodes because a battleship hits you from across the map. It's happened to me. It's not very pleasant, but at least in War Thunder you have respawns. It slightly makes up for it. It doesn't completely take it out of the cons. The next thing I want to get into is the aim. I did have it in the pros as a good thing, but I want to put in that there's a learning curve to it. It's not easy to just go from World of Warships aiming system to Warthunder aiming system. You're going to have the basics, but you're not going to account for the speed that you're doing. I know it just from my own experience. You're also not probably going to account for whether that ship's moving towards you or not, so you're constantly going to be missing shells, and really War Thunder doesn't do a great job of explaining that. And you're going to see that with my next one, which is the learning curve with your repair consumables. If you hit multiple repair consumables, like say you have a repair you need to do and a fire to put out, if you press both of those at once, it doubles the time of both of those repairs being completed. The trick is to do them all one at a time, because your crew is not good at multitasking. You're splitting up your crew into different jobs, whereas they could apply all their manpower to one thing, and sometimes you really don't want that. War Thunder really doesn't do a good job of explaining this early on, so you see people get into battles and say, well, my ship has a 140-second repair time, why should I even play this mode? And I think if they did a better job of explaining that, it'd be a lot more enjoyable. But as it is, it has to go into the cons, because a new player is just going to go in, they're going to hit every button that they see light up because their ship's on fire, it's flooding, it's damaged, and they're going to be out of the battle basically because none of it's getting done, their ship's still sinking. It's just annoying, and War Thunder really needs to do a better job of explaining it. The next thing I want to get into is the lack of ships in the game. For the Japanese line, which is the line I've been grinding on, it goes from the Mutsuki class all the way up to the Fusos and the Isseis. It's not a lot of ships yet. It's a really early game mode. They haven't gotten into adding a ton. The cruisers and destroyers are a little bit more fleshed out, but they're still early on in adding the battleships. You know, they've got some of the late war cruisers like the Des Moines, but it's really not fully fleshed out yet if you're expecting to grind to something like the Amagi or the Yamato or the Iowa or the Bismarck. The most you're going to get is a Scharnhorst. So you're really not going to get the full breadth of ships yet. And going off of that is you'll end up facing weird pair-ups just due to how they have the battle rating set and the fact that you have to go through the cruisers to get to the battleships. You may get a very early battleship, basically a dreadnought or slightly post-dreadnought, and you might be facing a Des Moines, and short of detonating them, they're going to rip you apart. I might know from experience. So it's a weird pair-up where, you know, you're in an early cruiser, but you're facing a gearing. You're in an early battleship, but you're facing, you know, a gearing and a Des Moines is probably the best examples I can have. And it'd be things like, you know, Tier 4 facing Tier 10 in World of Warships. I mean, there's not a lot of comparison. You can do damage to them, but as soon as they focus you down, you're really going to be in a tight spot. And I kind of wish that War Thunder would decompress those a little bit. They did say they're going to work on how the naval grind is shaped, so I'm hoping to see some changes to that in the future. Going off of that, in kind of into the detonation part again, you can still lose Silver Lions, which is your currency to repair your ships and buy your shells, if, say, you just lose a bunch of ships and you don't get anything done with them. Say you got focused down every time, or you couldn't do anything to that Des Moines way across the map because your tiny 36-second reload battleship couldn't do enough damage before it tilted over and sunk. So you can still lose Silver Lions, but it's not really as bad as it used to be. It's still got to go in the cons though, just because of the fact that you can face such new ships with very old ships, and because of the detonations, and because you have a respawn system. It really takes it away if you're trying to say, well, if I spawn another ship, then I'm going to lose Silver Lions because my team's going to lose this game, but I really want to shoot more stuff. It really detriments the game and makes people not want to continue the round, say if they could win it if they pushed and all spawned extra ships and stuff like that. So it's got to go in the cons. Another thing, and this is going to be a weird one from what I said earlier, is planes. Planes are going to be a con for me, just because they're sometimes very hard to shoot down just because of the players playing them. If they know what they're doing, they're going to stay out of range of your anti-aircraft guns. They're going to throw a bomb at you. It's going to explode, either damage your ship heavily or, on some cases, just outright sink you. You know, B-17 just strip bombing your ship is not going to go over well for said ship. And the fact that they can just randomly spawn them after doing not a super ton amount of damage, in my opinion, it really detriments the game modes. It's not to the level of carriers dominating the maps, but if you're in a ship that you know doesn't have a lot of anti-aircraft, you're constantly looking out for aircraft to make sure that, well, I need to be by another ship, because if that plane looks at me the wrong way, I'm done for. Another thing I want to say going off of that, and kind of towards the losing Silver Alliance thing, is once the damage really piles on, it's kind of an uphill battle. You know, if there's a bunch of ships shooting at you, and you're trying to repair, and you're trying to get out of the way, even say you're in a stock ship, you're kind of out of luck. They're gonna keep piling on the damage until you just roll over and sink, or your crew runs out, or you explode, something along those lines, and you're really not going to be able to fight back. And on the flip side, you know, even if you have a very advanced ship and a ton of people are shooting at you, if you really can't break that contact off because there's no islands near you to jump behind, if there's no smoke screens you can throw out, if you can't turn around for some reason, you're kind of screwed. And in a way, it's okay, because that means the enemy players kind of got you where they wanted you to be. But at the other time, to you, it just feels like, you know, there was nothing you could have done in that situation. All your guns are out, you know, your ship can't steer, it's listing over to one side, you can't repair it fast enough to fight back type deal. Another thing going off of that, and it's kind of back to the old ships versus new ships thing, is you can meet ships that you just can't touch with your guns. All your shells are bouncing, your HE's doing nothing because it's hitting armored spots. It's really not doing anything to the superstructure, and the little bits of damage you're doing are just anti-aircraft guns. It's not adding up fast enough to mean anything to that player, and eventually they're just going to turn your guns on you and shoot you. The thing to compare it to would be a destroyer shooting a battleship, or even in the video above is basically a Mogami with 155s. I can't really do much to those battleships that are on the enemy team. I basically have to throw torpedoes downrange and hope they hit somewhere vital so that, you know, they actually take damage from my ship. Sometimes you can take out a main battery or something if it was facing the wrong way and you wedged it in one of their lighter armored portions. But for the most part, it's going to be a couple crew members and nothing else got done there. Another thing I want to say for the cons is the distance to the caps and the speed of the ships, and the fact that the gameplay is so slow makes it almost impossible to go from one end of the map to the other in order to take a cap, unless you're in something really quick like a torpedo boat, a speedboat, something like that. In most cases, it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to say go from A cap and go capture C cap because your team really needs that one. So in my mind, it's a detriment, because once the game kind of gets rolling, the enemy fleet moves in a little bit more, you're 2 caps down, you need that second cap to start taking points away from the enemy team. It kind of just screws you over, and there's not a lot you can do about it because, say, you're on the opposite side of the map. I guess in some ways that could be player positioning, but at the same time, with the spawns on some maps, it just kind of kills the game for you. It's a loss in any condition. So, give and take there, I guess. The last and final thing that I want to put in the cons is bots. And this is going to have two categories. The first one is War Thunder's own bots. If the matches aren't full, say you get half the players that the game really wants you to have, it's going to fill the rest of that match with bots. And they're not going to be in top tier ships. You might be in a Des Moines and the bot's in an Iowa or a Krasny Krim or something along those lines. And they're fairly easy to shoot. They're really just cannon fodder that charges towards the cap, just throwing shells randomly at enemy ships. They're not very focused, in my opinion. But I think it's kind of a detriment because it distracts from the gameplay actually going on. And some of that is lack of players, of course. But I still think of it as a con. Even if it took the queues a little bit longer to actually make a matchup where there's enough players to make a full game, I think that it would probably be best if they limited the amount of War Thunder implemented bots in said games. And the other thing I wanted to go into was player bots. If there's a name on the enemy team or even your team that's all Chinese letters or it's CHAPLA, something like that, it's a bot. It's going to park itself, 2 kilometers from its spawn point, sit there, pick an enemy ship, and shoot at it for the entire game till it either sinks or runs out of ammo. And then it's going to go queue again. It is a bot program. You see them every so often. It sucks to have them on your team because they're fairly useless. It sucks to have them on the enemy team if you're the ship that it selected to shoot at, because now you got a constant rain of shells to worry about. So it's very problematic. I know War Thunder said they were going to work on it, and they were working on adjusting Naval so that it wasn't so profitable for these bots. But I still see them on occasion, so it's yet to be seen whether they're actually going to fix it or not. And there you have it. That's why I think, in most ways, War Thunder has a leg up on what World of Warships has become. It's a lot more of the actual naval battle versus the gimmick battle that World of Warships started to turn into. So, if my opinion's worth anything, which it really isn't, and I'm just a dude on the internet after all, give Warthunder Naval a try. See if you can figure it out to begin with. I may have missed a couple things in this video. You're welcome to tell me that, and I'll see if I can make something amending it. But I think you should give it a shot. If you're an avid World of Warships player who's a little bit fed up with that game, or you just want to try something different. It's actually pretty fun in my opinion. I'll see you guys next time. Good luck out there.